Hello, welcome in or welcome back to my channel. My name is Deb from DG Reads, and it is time for another ARC attack. If you're not familiar with my ARC attack series, it's basically an excuse to get to some upcoming releases that I have advanced copies for that I am super excited to read, and to try to get some reviews out to you to decide if you should be excited to read them as well. At the moment, I'm feeling a little bit behind on my ARCs. I definitely have some that aren't going to make it out to you before their publication date, but I'm trying to play a little bit of catch up in this 13th installment. How are we already on 13? I don't know, but let's make 13 a lucky number. To start with, I actually have a book that comes out tomorrow in filming time. And that is The Feeding by Anthony Bryan. This is an author that I know from fantasy books, and when I saw it, he had like a dystopian horror type fantasy going on, I had to request it. And in my defense, I only got approved for this audio arc last week, at the end of last week. So I'm not that far behind on reading it. This is a gifted copy that I received from Blackstone Publishing and NetGalley. We are following Layla, and she lives in a world where 15 years earlier, the Feeders came. And this is a zombie type feeling book, but also a vampire type feeling book. And the origin of the Feeders and where exactly they came from and the kickoff of this whole event isn't entirely clear in the book, but the world has reached a point where there are safe zones, but they're running out of certain things. Like many other people, Layla has someone in her life who is in need of medicine, and medicine is one of the things that they really don't have anymore. They occasionally get new people showing up at their community, but whatever they bring in is about all they have, and there's a serious black market, serious price tied to anything that could be really useful. There are what are called runners who go out into the world to try to bring supplies back, and Layla decides she's going to be one of these runners. There's a sort of trials competition type thing to become a runner, but ultimately becoming a runner is almost like a suicide mission because no runners go out with their entire team making it back. She of course makes it through the trials, gets selected, and goes on her first mission. And that's kind of where I'm at with the halfway point in the book. I am finding it very engaging, very easy to read. It is interesting to kind of learn about these feeders, and also a little frustrating because I feel like I don't quite get enough description out of them. We get a lot of what's not true. Like they're talking amongst themselves about how people have superstitions about hanging up garlic, about silver hurting them, about issues with daylight and different things like that, which again is why it's feeling kind of vampire-y, but also it seems like it has a zombie impact in terms of people getting infected and coming and trying to get in where the humans are, and that has a very kind of Walking Dead almost vibe to it. I do find Layla an interesting character. I understand her motivations, why she would take this on, and she's kind of going out of her way to take care of the people she cares about. This is a world where you really don't have very many people to care about or to be invested in because they may not be around tomorrow. There's a lot of present dangers going on. So I am finding it very engaging. Like I said, I am still wishing it had a little more world building, but I don't think that's the point here. I think it's more about the action, more about the losses and the forward momentum of exploring this post-apocalyptic world. So I'm going to keep going on it, see how it's feeling by the end, and I'll check back in with you. I have now finished The Feeding and overall had a decent time with it. I think for me, it didn't quite give me all the world building and the being able to fully picture these feeders in my head that I really wanted out of that. But it was enjoyable, it was action, it was definitely gory in moments, it was definitely high risk. Everyone was at risk, essentially. And it's a pretty bleak picture of what this world is like and what the chances are for humanity to actually be able to survive it. I think there were some really interesting twists to the creatures and what our main character Layla learns about them as she's going along. I really would love to see more fleshed out from this world. There's different levels to the creatures and different abilities that they have over time. And really, I think it's a really just interesting premise and setup. And that kept me engaged. Plus the action definitely kept the pace moving really well and kept me hooked in that regard. So I think for me, this one's getting a 3.5, verging on a 3 just because for my personal preferences, it didn't quite go the directions I wanted it to with the way the world was being built out. I do think think it pictured kind of a post-apocalyptic world 15 years down the line and did well at kind of predicting what would be the problems, what would be kind of going on with the world, what would the needs be of the people, and all of that. And then for my next book, since we are doing ARC August, the readathon brought to us by Vanessa at Read with Dr. B, I decided this would be a good installment to do a little bit of catch up on some overdue arcs in addition to reading current ones. So one of the ones that I'm definitely overdue on is A Mother Always Knows by Sarah Strohmeyer. And this one I believe came out on July 1st, and I did start it with the intention of reading it back in June, and I just wasn't in the right mindset to sit and focus on a physical read. I've actually at this point misplaced what I even did with my physical ARC. I know it exists somewhere around here. Maybe I'll find it before I finish the book, we'll see. But I did wind up picking up the audiobook from the library anyway, but I still want to say a thank you to Harper for sending me the gifted ARC. In this book, we're following Stella, and she is a librarian. She's trying to live life under the radar, and the problem with that is she was raised in a cult. It was a group of what they called diviners. There was a cult leader, and she was there with her mother. She witnessed the death of her mother, or at least the aftermath of the death of her mother, and the person who killed her knows that she saw him, but after surviving on her own for a little bit, she was found. She went back to live with her dad. She's lived a pretty normal life since then when she left at 10 years old. But cold case people have dug up her mother's murder. It was never officially solved, and this has put her in the limelight again. The cult is coming after her because they're worried that she will speak up, turn on the cult, and cause problems. So she's kind of on the run from that. She's losing her housing. She's potentially having issues losing her job. There's a lot on her plate right now, and these people are out to get her, and as far as she's concerned, outkill her. This one did take a little bit to get hooked into, but I am enjoying the kind of premise of this person who has walked away from a dangerous situation and now is back in the crosshairs. We're getting her POV, we're getting flashbacks back in time to her mother's POV from when she was still with the diviners. And we're also getting a third POV that I'm not entirely sure exactly how it's going to hook in. It seems to be someone who's heard about the diviners and the cold case, and there was a Netflix documentary on the group, and that stirred things up as well. So I'm still at the halfway point, or nearly halfway. I think I'm at like 40%, trying to piece together how things are fitting, but I am finding an easy read. I'm finding it engaging. So hopefully I will continue to do so and be back with some final thoughts. If you were placing bets on whether or not I would find my book before finishing my book, the answer is no. No, I have not. I admittedly haven't spent that much time looking for it, but I did do a good run through of downstairs, my bedroom, my reading room, and it's hiding from me. I am theorizing currently that Kylie's like intentionally hid it from me. That's the theory I'm going with. But I did indeed finish A Mother Always Knows. And overall, I liked this. It wound up being kind of in the okay camp, a solid 3-star read for me. There were some surprises along the way, but I wouldn't say it necessarily built the tension that I wanted. There were a lot of bad decisions by our characters, which frustrated me at times. There were definitely plot conveniences. I did appreciate that the author basically said, I know these are plot conveniences, by having our main character question things that were happening and people who would show up and things like that. But I wanted there to be a little bit more maybe reason behind some of the things and the timing. I was surprised at some of the ultimate answers, and I'm not convinced they necessarily had a lot of groundwork laid for them, but it made sense. So I'm not saying it came completely out of left field either. I did also want a little bit more of a picture of the aftermath of how things played out. Without spoiling anything, I can't say too much there, but there were a few things I would have liked to see kind of how they played out in the end. But with that, it still was an enjoyable read. I think this is an author I would pick up from again. It was an interesting concept, the cult idea, the way that was developed, and some of the things that they believed were presented as fact in the book. They weren't being questioned as completely out of nowhere, but also they were dangerous and were very much trying to use people's willingness to give over their money and their time and their beliefs to this system for personal gain as well. So overall, I'm glad I picked this one up. I'm glad to have read it, and I'm also glad to pick up a new arc next. So I'll be back once I pick up my next book. I have another arc to talk to you about and another one where I'm running a little bit behind. This is a book that just came out yesterday in real time, and I just got the audio arc for it at the very end of last week, so I'm not terribly behind, but I just made a stop at UPS and got the hard copy. So I do know I'm a little behind when the hard copy's already here. But this is Woven from Clay by Jenny Birch. It is a YA fantasy, and it came with a nice signed signature plate. Honestly, the cover for this one is really what drew me in and had me interested to take another look. And the synopsis also sounded good, but I love the cover. Anyway, in this one, we are following a young woman named Tara. She was adopted, so she doesn't know anything about her past. And that's okay. She's going into her senior year. She has big plans for a fantastic year. And then she meets Thorn. And Thorn comes up to her asking where he is. Where is he? He's being very insistent. She has no clue what he's talking about. And it takes quite a while for him to finally realize she has no clue who or what she is. She's a golem, and she was created along with others by this kind of rebel sorcerer named Quill. And the coven that he came from is wanting to hold him accountable and kill him. But that means that all of his creations would also die, which means our friend Tara would also die. So this doesn't sound so good to Tara once she's kind of caught up to what's been going on, who she is, what she is. She has to figure out what powers she has, what her kind of legacy is, and how to convince these witches not to kill her and her entire line. So I am about 40% of the way through this one. I've been listening to the audio, like I said, and really enjoying myself with it. I think it makes for a different story. I haven't really read a golem story, which makes this perfect for the hardest reading challenge you'll ever do. There's an other creatures category on the spooky creatures challenge, so I think a golem works perfectly for that. And I like Tara. I like her kind of quest to do her senior year upright. She's a student who wants good grades. She wants to do what she needs to do to graduate. She wants a good future ahead of her. She's close with her adoptive parents, and she has a best friend who likes her as more than a friend, although she's not so sure about that. And then we have Thorn coming in the picture, which, you know, he's cute. She likes him potentially, but also he's a little obnoxious. So I'm interested to see where this goes. It's a really fun read so far, and I think it's going to continue to pair quite well with getting some good crochet done. So that's really my plan for this evening, is to keep going on this. I think it's reading pretty quickly, so I suspect I will get through the rest of it pretty quickly as well and be able to give you some final thoughts on this one on my quest to kind of work on catching up on some of the arcs I'm behind on. I am back with some arc updates. First off, I finished up Woven from Clay, and overall I like this. I think it was unique. It was definitely different than other things I've read. Do I think being made of mud is my favorite idea of a superpower? No, not really, but I think it did make for some interesting scenarios, getting to follow our main character along as she was learning about her powers, about what made her unique, about what this man that created her had kind of intended, and seeing her use her muddiness to an advantage and sometimes a disadvantage. But overall, I think it was a unique read, and this is definitely an author I would go ahead and pick up from again. I do think it definitely felt YA. It was very much a contemporary fantasy in the sense that we're out of high school, we're in high school situations, they've got class projects, they've got a play that's being put on, the guys are on the football team, girls are rooting them on, but I think it just was a book that felt natural in that setting and kind of the coming of age nature of discovering who you are, but you're a golem. So overall, I think this one was a strong 3.5. I had a good time with it and excited to move on to my next book. So I needed to work on some files in preparation for a audit we have going on next week at work, so I needed an audiobook today, and I popped on the audiobook for The Break-In by Katherine Faulkner. This is an author I've been wanting to try for a while. I received this gifted arc from Gallery, and since it was available as a gifted ALC from Simon Audio, I went ahead and picked it up in that format as well, and I've been having a good time with this. We are following Alice, and not that long before the book begins, Alice killed someone, and she has been under investigation for this, but really it felt like a righteous thing because she and a couple friends were in the kitchen having a drink and their kids were in the next room playing. The nanny was in the next room with the kids, and this man came to the door, broke into the house, and threatened the children, basically. That's how Alice perceived it. And in the course of all of this happening, she winds up killing him. And she is being attacked by internet trolls for this because she's a wealthy woman killing a poor man. She's getting called all sorts of things. We have people who are supporting her and saying she was, of course, doing what she needed to do to protect her child. And there's just a lot of conflicting opinions on this. Along with this, she starts getting messages that indicate that maybe there's a reason this man was breaking into her house. Maybe it wasn't just a random invasion. Maybe he was there for a purpose. Her nanny seems to be acting a little weird. Her husband is really dismissive of all of her fears, of everything that's happening to her, and is basically giving her the advice to ignore it. And she's not doing that. She's doing things that involve investigating this man, his life, his sister's life, his mother's life, and getting herself wrapped up in things, but even that's going weird also. So there's a lot of things in here that have me really intrigued. I've been coming up with really wild theories, which I'm hoping aren't the case, but I'm so interested to see where this ultimately is going to wind up. I have suspicions about certain people. There's definitely things that seem fishy, and I do feel for Alice quite a lot in this situation. She's trying to deal with having a life for herself, with taking care of her daughter. She's starting a new job, which is really interesting. Also, she's an art restorer, which I always find that kind of an interesting concept about how people go about that. So I really like her as a main character. Is she making decisions that are driving me a little crazy? Yes. She's making choices I certainly wouldn't agree with, lying to people, getting herself a little too involved in things. But overall, I am having a good time with this. So I'm at, I think, 45% currently. So I am going to be heating myself up some dinner, continuing on with this, I think, tonight. I don't know that I'll finish it tonight necessarily. We'll see how into my crochet or how into whatever I wind up doing this evening I get with either the audiobook or maybe sitting down and actually physically reading for a little bit. We shall see. But I will be sure to let you know my thoughts once I finish. I'm back because I finished up The Break-In, and I really actually enjoyed this. I definitely will be reading more from this author. I think it did a really good job of throwing in some twists and turns, throwing in some red herrings, keeping the reader kind of wondering what exactly was going on. There were certainly some things I made some guesses about that proved somewhat true, at least. There were definitely things I did not see coming, and the way the different stories intertwined did wind up surprising me in a few places, and I appreciated how the author did it. I will say it did feel a little long to me. At one point I was thinking, okay, this is wrapping up, and I looked and I still had 3 more hours left on the audio. So it did take a little longer than maybe I felt like I needed it to in that moment, but still there was more coming in those last 3 hours. It's not like it was dragging out toward the end. There just was kind of a moment where I thought things were wrapping up and then things unraveled a little bit more. So in the end, I gave this one 4 stars. I think it was engaging. It was what I wanted out of kind of a domestic and psychological thriller. So if those are subgenres of thrillers you enjoy, I would recommend this one. This one is coming out on August 26th, so it will be on shelves, I think, right before this video is in theory meant to be live, if I'm remembering correctly. So that is a recommendation for you. I am back. I'm wearing a witch hat. It doesn't really have anything to do with my next update, but I just finished filming my TBR for the Magical Readathon, so I figured I'd leave it on rather than have witch hat hair. The update I'm here to bring you is that I am now halfway into Play Nice by Rachel Harrison, and I am having a good time with this one. This is a gifted copy I received from PRH Audio, and this is an author I've really enjoyed in the past, so I went into this one with really high hopes. We are following Cleo, who is an influencer. She's the baby of her family. She's had a kind of rocky past. She grew up with a mother who believed their house was haunted or possessed by a demon. She eventually kind of split from her mother, as did her whole family. She grew up more so with her father and his wife and her 2 sisters. When she gets the call that her mother has died, she's not quite sure how to feel about it, how to process it. And she makes the decision to go to the funeral. When she goes, she learns that her mother still owned that house. According to the mom, it was to hold on to it to make sure that the demon in the house stayed dormant. In any case, the sisters now are going to be inheriting this house. Cleo decides to take on the project of fixing up the house, to flip it, to be able to sell it for more money. She goes to the house, balances it with her influencing lifestyle, and starts pretty quickly to realize that things in the house aren't quite what they see. Maybe her mother wasn't entirely out of the realm of reality. There's a book that her mother wrote that their father told them never to read. They'd all agreed to that, but she finds part of the book in the house, and it's got notes written to her in the margins of what was embellished for the sake of the book, what was real, what wasn't. And Cleo didn't remember a whole lot about growing up with her mother, about the house and everything that happened there, but memories are starting to come back that maybe some scary things did in fact happen. This has been a little bit of a slow burn so far, I would say, and we're getting to know Cleo. I love the relationship she has with her sisters because they annoy each other. They're very different women, but also they're very close. They love each other. They have a lot of links between them. I think the kind of ideas about this mother, she was abusive, she was an alcoholic, everything kind of makes sense, the conflicted feelings that Cleo and her sisters are all having about the house, about her mother, everything else. So I think the character work is being really well done. I think the house is really interesting. We're starting to get more and more kind of out of what the house is capable of, what's in the house. We're getting some backstory from outside people as well, since Cleo herself doesn't remember a lot of details and her sisters are pretty tight-lipped about things. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where this winds up going and go for there. It's also a great excuse to just be able to sit and crochet and listen to my book since I don't have a physical copy on this one. So that is my plan for today, and I'll check back in with you once I finish. I'm back with some final thoughts on Play Nice, and the action in this one, the second half definitely ramped up. I did enjoy my time with it overall. I wouldn't say this is a new favorite Rachel Harrison, but it was very engaging. I liked seeing our main character start to kind of come into her own a little bit more and stand up for what she actually remembered. And it went against what her siblings and her father were telling her were true, but she knew certain things to be accurate. Getting to read the mom's passages in her book and seeing how that matched up with her memories and with the reality of what we were seeing in the house itself was a really interesting way to go. Books within books, I'm not always on board with. Sometimes I really enjoy them, sometimes I don't. And here it really worked well for me. I think there was a lot of compassion that I wound up having for the mom. She was far from perfect. She had a lot of struggles, but also she did love her children. And this house and this possession and what she knew to be true really interfered with that. I appreciated also that not every relationship was perfectly healed by the end of this book. There were a lot of hurt feelings and a lot of issues that came out of things, but you saw relationships develop where maybe there wasn't one before. You saw relationships get fractured that had been super close before, and there's a plan to move on, but not everything's tied up in a neat bow by the end. So all that said, I thought there were some creepy moments here and there throughout. I think the fact that our main character had so many abilities to escape the house, if that makes sense, because there were a lot of outs with the relationships she was developing, with her family, with her having a life in New York versus this house being in New Jersey. I felt like that took a little bit of the pressure off the spookiness of the house, if that makes some level of sense. But I do think it had some good creepy moments still. So in the end, this one's getting a 4-star from me. I had a good time with it, and I am very glad that I got to pick up another Rachel Harrison book. I will look forward to more from her in the future. Late night update for me. It's been one of those evenings. Everything keeps going wrong. So bear with me, but I do have some thoughts on a new arc, and that is Hot Desk by Laura Dickerson. This is coming out September 2nd. I have a gifted copy from Gallery Books and also Simon Audio. I've been listening to the audiobook this evening and working on a new crochet project, which has been giving me some troubles, and I've had to remove things a couple times, and I'm a little bit stressed by it. So I completely missed the fact that I'm actually 66% of the way in here. Instead of giving you a halfway thought, you're getting the 2/3 thought, but that's okay. This one is following two people who share a desk, and they happen to work for opposing publishing houses. And both of these publishing houses are out to get a highly sought after manuscript. a famous author has recently died, and it comes to light that there is an unpublished book. The widow of this man reaches out to Rebecca, one of these people sharing the desk, and wants her to come discuss this book. And this is weird because Rebecca's not well known. She's new to the publishing game, and she's unsure why she's been tapped to do this. It turns out there's a connection between this woman, this widow, and Rebecca's mother. And this brings a lot of different things to light. We're following Rebecca. We're also following her mother back in time when her mother knew this widow. This author who has passed away was famous for excellent writing. He has many, many fans, but also he's known for not being good to women. He's sexist. He's had a lot of issues over the years. And there are some issues that come to light with this new manuscript as well, and with the history. We're also following Ben, the other person who shares this desk, and they have this office rivalry kind of going. A lot of miscommunication tied to that because they don't know each other. They've never met. At the 66% mark, they've barely met in person. So this is marketed as a romance. And I think going in with that expectation is wrong. Thankfully, a friend had reviewed it and mentioned that, so I did go in with different expectations. This has a lot of really heavy topics, a lot of trigger warnings in here, and I feel like they're kind of spoilery, but I would recommend looking into them if you do have really sensitive subjects. The tone is much more about the friendships, about relationships, about history, about women in the workplace and women's rights and men behaving badly and things like that. So I think it's going to go in the romance direction. Certainly, there's definitely been some rom-com-y type of moments as they're bickering about things back and forth with post-its or whatever over this shared desk situation. But at the moment, it's not feeling at all romancy. So I am very curious to see where it's going to wind up going. And yeah, that's where I'm at with it. And I'll let you know once I get to the final thoughts stage of this. And apparently that shouldn't take too long if I get lost in my crochet again. It is now the next morning and I have a couple of updates for you. First off, as I was crocheting and having more annoyances with my yarn, I did finish up Hot Desk last night. And I think the commentary and the discussions and the contemporary and historical elements of this were all really well done. I would recommend it for those things. I would not recommend this as a romance personally. Like I mentioned last night, our characters had barely met face to face as of when I stopped last night, and the little bit of banter we were getting back and forth with them virtually doesn't really come to a satisfying conclusion in my opinion. There is like a miscommunication that's going on both of their sides, and that kind of gets revealed but in the middle of their first sex scene, which I guess is the only sex scene in the bulk of the book. But it doesn't even get addressed when they make the reveal. And I wanted there to be more of that banter, to be more of that continuing on and them building a relationship as opposed to it going from 0 to 60, which is personally how I felt it went. Yes, it's slow burn in the sense that they don't even meet each other for quite a long time and they're rivals in each other's minds up till that point. But then as soon as they meet, it goes really fast after that. I did really like how the issues of the publishing of this book got resolved in the end and the elements that brought out and the discussions that came out of it. I think that side of it was really well done. The fact that this is set against a backdrop of a publishing industry and that makes it a bookish book, which is very much up my alley. And I think overall, going into it with the right expectations and not expecting the romance to be front and center, I think this worked really well for me and I'm giving it a solid 4 stars. And then with that, I wanted to start something as I was trying to get to sleep last night, or I guess really early this morning technically, but I did start my next book. And I'm already 40% of the way into it, which doesn't take too long. It's a short one. And that is This Is a Safe Space by Lucinda Berry. This is an upcoming release from Simon Audio, and it is coming out on October 21st, which is a great day for a new book and new things because that's my birthday. But that's neither here nor there. This is one that I was gifted as an audiobook, and it is only existing as an audiobook, at least for now. This is another one where there's production value involved. There's text messaging going back and forth between two people and you get the sounds of people typing. There's a doorbell and things like that going on in the background. We are following a woman who is a therapist and she's dealing with with her own compulsions and obsessions and issues as well. She and her husband have had a really rocky past. They're trying to move past it, but he has had to set a boundary with her that she needs to stay out of his phone. And this is a boundary she's been trying to respect, but also fails at. And she's going through his phone and sees a text chain with his cousin. And this discussion talks about a bachelor party that went too far. An exotic dancer who was part of this, and something happened with this dancer that went too far. And this is something in real time, in real life, she hasn't been told anything about by her husband. She's not clear from these texts what exactly happened, but she's starting to realize there may be a connection to her own life. In her practice, she had been seeing a woman who had a stage name of the same initials as this woman who they're talking about becoming irate and doing things like keying a car and all of these things that are a little over the top. And in her practice, this young woman was being harassed by someone she met at one of her dancing experiences for a bachelor party. And in her mind, she was in danger from this stalker. So what exactly happened? What happened to this patient of hers? She hasn't heard from her in months. And how is this all going to come to light without blowing up her own marriage? This is where we're at with it, and it's really entertaining. I think Lucinda Berry does delve into issues of a therapist quite well, and this definitely has the potential to go into some really dark places, which I also expect from her as an author. So I'm very much looking forward to continuing on with this one. It's only a 3-hour, 40-minute audiobook, hence why I'm already 40% in the next morning. So I think it'll be a quick finish up on my way to work today, probably, or potentially dipping into my commute home too, but it won't take me too long to get to the end of this one. I'm back later the same day. As expected, I did finish up This Is a Safe Place, and I think I enjoyed this one for the most part. My logic brain kind of wants to pick a few things apart, very minor things, but I think this is a book where I just needed to turn that part of my brain off and kind of go with the flow. I think the author pulled off some twists and turns I didn't see coming. I feel like the logic part of my brain maybe wanted a little more groundwork for some of that ahead of time, but I liked that it was fast paced. It's only a 3.5 hour audiobook, so I mean, I think my expectations are that I wasn't going to get the fully fleshed out cast of characters and everything else that I necessarily wanted, but I think it was done pretty well. There were some things that were talked about early in the book that do come back into play, kind of the history between some of the characters, between the two men, between the sisters, and all of that, and how that played out in here. I feel like if I say too much more about the plot, it's going to spoil things again, since it's such a short book, but it was such an easy binge listen. It kept me hooked. It definitely, I think, touched on some issues with therapy and therapists well. We get to see our main character struggling with her own issues even as she's trying to help other people. And I think that's very realistic, and her need for her own kind of therapy sessions and so forth. So overall, this is getting a solid, I think 3.5 rounding to 4 is where I'm sitting with it right now. I literally just finished it on the way home from work. But with that, I do have another update for you. I actually got a book in the mail yesterday, and I'm now halfway into it, so look at me being on top of things. That is The Wrong Daughter by Dandy Smith. I received a gifted copy from Kensington, and this came with something saying that it comes out August 26th. Now, in looking this up, it previously had been out, or at least it had been out in Kindle and audio, because my library has Kindle and audio for this book. So I think that was with a different publisher. So I'm guessing this got picked up by Kensington, or maybe it had been published in a different country and now it's being published here. I am not sure, but I do know Kensington is putting this paperback copy out on August 26th. That matches when I looked it up on Amazon just to see the dates. And this one is in fact on there for pre-order for the 26th. This book is focused on two sisters. Caitlin and Olivia were home alone. Their parents had gone to a dinner party. They were 10 and 13, I believe. And Caitlin wakes up in the middle of the night. She hears a noise. She looks out and she sees someone in a mask taking off with her sister. And she's too afraid to really intervene. And her sister isn't heard from again. This has been weighing on her for years and years. Her parents and her have a little bit of a rocky relationship. She's not the daughter that Olivia would have been. She's not the daughter who saved Olivia. She's the daughter who watched Olivia kind of walk away. Cut to present day, and Caitlin gets a phone call. She gets a call from her dad that she needs to get to the house because Olivia's back. Caitlin is now a teacher. She's engaged to be married. She has a lot going on. She has her independent life, but suddenly she's back in the role of younger sister to this child, this adult who has come back. And there's some question in her mind, we know from the synopsis, of is this really her sister? There's details about the past that her sister seems to get wrong that she should know, but also it's been a lot of years, so maybe that's understandable. Maybe whatever she's been through, which we don't really know, she hasn't really fully shared that, has caused some legit reasons to forget stuff. Meanwhile, we're also getting passages, chapters in here, they're not as many, but from Eleanor's perspective, and she's a young woman. She's I think 17, or maybe not. I may be misinterpreting that. But she lives with her brother, and they have an uncle who comes and visits them on weekends, and he's in control of their estate until she's old enough to inherit, which is where I was thinking she may need to turn 18, but it's possible her inheritance age is different and I'm just misremembering. But there's weirdness going on here. Robert seems to be the uncle, doesn't seem to be the great guy. There's an inappropriate relationship happening between Eleanor and her brother. They've been on their own since I think it said Eleanor's parents were killed when she was 3. They were killed in a boating accident, and Robert was the only survivor from that, so there's some suspicions there as well. And the relationship between Eleanor and her brother feels a little bit too close for siblings. So I am reserving judgment on that one, and I have no idea at the halfway point how that's going to connect in with the rest of this book. So I'm going to keep reading, see how this goes, and I'll report back. Okay, I've now finished The Wrong Daughter, and I enjoyed this. I think it went a lot darker than I expected from the synopsis. The author certainly didn't feel the need to pull any punches in terms of people doing bad things, crossing over lines. I did make a few predictions about who I couldn't feel like I could trust, but there were reveals that did shock me. So that was a really nice mix for me. I got a couple things semi-right. There was a lot of questioning along the way how the different storylines were going to come together. And there is absolutely some unreliable narrator tropes going on in here. So I completely forgot that my card was nearly full and I started filming anyway. So there will have been a jump, I'm sure, as I cleared out some space. But the things that happened in here definitely fall into the woman seems hysterical, don't trust her trope. And I know that's not everyone's favorite. It's not always my favorite either. But I think in here it was done in a way that had me feeling a lot of tension for our character, for really feeling kind of the almost claustrophobic feeling of having no moves to make because everyone's not in her corner. I definitely had times where I was frustrated with her and the decisions she was making. I could see 3 steps ahead how that was going to work against her as the plot go further. So I did think she made some bad choices, but she was kind of pinned into a corner, so I also kind of can see it. And obviously for a plot purpose, we needed things to happen. So in the end, I think I'm giving this one a good 3.5 stars. This is an author I would definitely read from again. It goes some dark places, so do trigger warnings on this one. Without going into any full details, we have someone taking children. Plus there's the inappropriate relationship between the siblings that I mentioned, and that gives you an idea of some of the things going on in here. So with that, I will be back. I think I'm going to try to get at least one more book in for this one, make the most of Arc August and my bonus Arc Attack, and see how we go. I'm back with a very highly anticipated arc, and that is How Bad Things Can Get by Darcy Coates. This is a gifted copy I received from Poison Pen Press. It's coming out on August 26th, so right before this video is meant to be live, I think. This is one that I actually meant to get to with my vacation to Zanzibar, either before or during, but just didn't quite get the opportunity to pick it up. And that's because this has an island setting. We are following a group of people as they go to this private island owned by this bazillionaire, and and he's putting on this weekend of competitions and prizes and just wildness happening on this island. This island is also the site of a historic tragedy, historic like cult mystery almost, because a cult actually lived there and they actually wound up isolated on this island for various reasons. We get the backstory as we get further into the book, and things go very, very badly. Man in charge is creating these games. They are not the safest. They don't have security in place for things. Things begin going wrong pretty quickly, and we're primarily following Ruth, who has her own bloody history, as the synopsis says. You learn more about this again as the book goes along, but she has a really interesting tie to how things are happening. She has a really bad feeling about what's going on this island, and as she begins to witness things that don't appear safe or that people appear to be hurt or missing or whatever, she and everyone else begins to wonder what is going on this island. They are isolated. It's a modern day, but things keep going wrong. We've also got a journalist type person who is kind of watching the action a little bit removed. He has a past with the man who owns the island, and potentially there's some issues there. He's there to seemingly be a little bit of a whistleblower. We've got Ruth and her connections. We've got the friend she's with. There's one of the four of them that keeps staring at her, giving her weird looks. And I don't know, there's a lot of mysteries going on in here. For the most part, I'm having a good time. There have been a few places where I feel like we're getting info dumped, and it doesn't go on for too long, but like we get a whole history of the island passage where people are watching a movie of the history of the island, and as the reader, we're just reading this whole passage. And it's interesting, but I'm still kind of trying to piece how things are all going to go together. Overall, I'm having fun with this. Darcy Coates writes some amazing atmosphere, and that's definitely coming through in here. And the darkness, Ruth has these crazy vivid dreams, and those dreams really do feel creepy in the moment you're reading them. And I am glad to be taking my time with this one on ebook. It is taking me a little bit longer because I am very much in my crochet and audiobook era right now, but I am looking forward to continuing on with the book, hopefully this evening, and finishing it up. If not tonight, probably by tomorrow. So with that, I will leave you here and check in soon. I'm back later than anticipated, but I have finished How Bad It Can Get. And I don't know how much it was the book and how much it was my inability to sit and focus for long periods of time on reading. But it did take me a considerable amount of time to finish this book, which is not what I expect from a Darcy Coates book. I feel like normally I get pretty quickly sucked in and binge the whole thing. I think with this one, there's a few different things. One, the first half was very slow burn. It was a lot of learning the back history of Ruth and this petition group and everything, and not knowing how that was really going to tie into the island setting and everything else. I think I was thinking early on that they were isolated previously on this particular island, and I don't think that's the case, but I do feel like I still was a little bit confused. I think the fact that Ruth has been having kind of visions made me think some of the things she was seeing were flashbacks when really they were maybe prophecies. I think that could very much be on me though, and my a little bit of distractedness. Once I sit down with this book and actually started reading it, I was engaged. It was a really easy read. So I don't want to hold too much against the book because I think me being tired when I was picking it up, because I was picking it up after work, and just in general, me not reading a ton physically this month did a disservice. But the second half definitely makes a very big shift in the type of book we're talking about. The gore ups a lot. There was some gore in the earlier stages, but it definitely goes big time in the second half. We get some twists and turns to the characters. Some I saw coming, some I didn't. So I appreciated that. It definitely ramps up the action and the tension, and all of that I think started working much better for me toward the end. I binged the last 40% or a little over 40% yesterday. So with that, I think in the end, I really did get more invested in it, but it's still not going down in my memory as a favorite Darcy Coates. I would say it reads a little bit YA slasher horror, and that's not a complaint. It just felt a little younger. I think if I did my math right, this was when Ruth, as one of our main characters, is 27, and I know the man who owns the island is 30 or in his 30s. The reporter we're following, I think, is closer to that age as well. So they're not super young, but some of their attitudes and their where maybe history shows them to be a little bit, or acting a little bit younger maybe. I don't know. Again, not a complaint. I love YA horror. That's not something that I steer away from, but it is something that I felt as I was reading it. So anyway, in the end, I think I'm giving this a 3.5 because I did enjoy the ending more. I think it's maybe leaning more towards a 3 on the end of a 3.5 spectrum, but overall still had a good time. And with that, I will go ahead and leave this one here for the moment and check in with you later. Checking back in with you not much later at all, but I did remember there was one more book I did want to talk to you about, and this is one that already came out in August. It was an August 12th release, and it's one that I started and I'm not finishing in the present moment, but that's more about my personal current reading taste and not about the book, so I figured I would mention it and what I was liking about it before moving on. And that is The Book of Lost Hours by Haley Gelfuso. This is a really interesting premise. It's time travel and historical. This book is set in a world where memories are stored after somebody dies in books in this massive library. And there are certain watches that allow access to this library, and it's generally passed from father to son, and it's very limited who can get them historically. In the course of time, the government has gotten involved in this, and you can imagine that doesn't go the best. And they have been kind of manipulating memories a little bit, rewriting history a little bit. We are following Elizabeth, and when she was, I think, 11, her father shoved her into the library to protect her. It's 1938, yes, and forces are approaching, the war's happening, so he puts her in to protect her with the promise that he'll come. He never comes. She winds up growing up on her own in this library, so there's really no one who knows this library better than her, and when she sees these people coming in to destroy things, she's on a mission to save them. She has abilities to use the books and use the memories in really interesting ways, and it's more than other people who have access to library can do because of her just affinity with these memories and how these books work. She knows how to find things in these books and how to make use of them. And it's such an interesting premise. So I think if you are in the mood for a historical fiction book, I think this one could work really well. I just wasn't finding myself super invested. I have not been having the best time lately with historical fiction. So I made it about a third of the way in, and the library portions I was really enjoying. We were getting a little bit more of the history portions and going into memories in the past, and that just wasn't drawing me in. So I decided not to make myself push through it if it wasn't hooking me in the moment. And it's one that I would like to get back to at some point. But in any case, I did want to mention it here because it was an ARC very kindly gifted to me by Atria, and I did want to still be able to mention it. It is 82 degrees inside my house right now, so we're going to keep this nice and short and sweet so I can go barbecue some sausages and veggies for dinner and then seal up the house and turn on the AC. I am very ready for fall, but it's only August in California. Fall doesn't come for a very, very long time. But anyway, that's neither here nor there because I've started a new arc. And this is the point in the video where I confess I have this silly idea of making my 13th episode of this Arc Attack series be 13 books long. So we've got a couple more to go. The book that I started is Making History by KJ Parker. This is a little novella that I received from Tor, and it is coming out, I want to say September 9th. I could be wrong, and I don't have my phone right on me to double check myself. So if I'm wrong, I will try to correct it, or certainly I'll have the date down below where I do the little timestamps. But anyway, what this book is it is set in a fantasy world. We've got a king who has this brilliant idea. He wants to go to war with the neighboring kingdom, but they really have no interest in fighting. So how is he going to pick a fight with them? He brings together 12 of the most brilliant minds of his kingdom and decides they're going to fake a history and a rivalry from the past with this other kingdom. They are meant to create this culture that used to exist that this other kingdom overran and destroyed, and he's hoping that they can create this, discover it with all the air quotes around it, and once they tell the story of these poor people who were murdered by these savage neighbors, they will then endorse a war against them. The main character that we're following is a linguist. He's kind of in charge of dealing with the language when they put text in these historic records they're going to discover, he's the one who's like taking modern language from that region and backtracking it to make it sound older and less modern, I guess you would say. It's a really interesting premise. It has a lot of kind of nerdy moments, and the text admits it. The linguist says things like, I'm really interested in language, and this might bore you, but I'm going to tell you some stuff. Feel free to skip ahead. And he'll go off on a little bit of a tangent related to the language. I find it very interesting, but I can see where this isn't going to work for everyone. I think I'm liking it pretty much so far. I'm at about the 30% mark for a novella that's only around, I want to say it's 100, maybe 150 pages. I didn't want to wait too long to give initial thoughts. This is very stream of consciousness in some ways. We're getting plot, we're getting information, but we're also just in this man's head, and his thoughts wander a little bit here and there. It's also one of those books where there's no punctuation really. There's no chapter headings, I don't think, or at least at this point I haven't come across any. There's little breaks in the text, but that's about it. So it's just a really interesting concept at this point. I'm not sure how much this is going to get into the nitty-gritty of how they're going to try to pull this off versus being more thought experiment, because they're getting into issues like, what are you going to do to keep this a secret when you have to bring all these laborers in to build whatever they're going to create? And that's going to be a huge security risk if you let those people go out and tell people about it. And there's a lot of interesting things like that that they're thinking through. So I'm curious to see where this is going. I think it's going to be a quick one to finish up, and I'll be back once I have my final thoughts. I am back with final thoughts on Making History, and I don't have a lot currently. I think what I said in the first clip probably mostly holds true. It was a really interesting idea, and it gets into some really interesting arenas of what is false, what false realities become real, how do you know the difference between the two, and our characters kind of questioning some things without getting into any spoilery details. I just wasn't compelled to keep picking the book up. I would hit moments where I'd get engaged, and then it was really easy to get distracted from it. I think the concept was cool. The execution was fine. I think the ending felt a little rushed to me, like we got to a point, there was a reveal, and then it kind of ended really quickly after that. I think this definitely was the appropriate medium, it being a novella. It was an interesting concept to explore. The chatty language discourse from our narrator and his discussions on what he was up to were interesting, but not my favorite style of narration. So I think this one just didn't really quite hit for me. So in the end, it's getting a 2.5. But I still think it's worth maybe trying out if it's a concept that you find interesting, because it is a very short read. I think it was like 125 pages, according to Goodreads, since I don't have the physical copy in front of me. And it was something that I think if this type of narration style is something that's going to work for you, it's maybe one still to check out. It just didn't quite hit as something that was a for me type of book. I'm back with another arc for you, and that is The Wrong Sister by Clara Douglas. We had The Wrong Daughter, now we're on The Wrong Sister. Very similar titles, very different vibes. This is a gifted audiobook that I just received this week from Harper Audio, and the book itself already came out on August 5th. This is one that was actually on my TBR for this month. It was a Kylie pick, and I've been waiting to see if the library would give me an audiobook before I tried to pick up the physical copy, and it did not come through from there, and then all of a sudden NetGalley sent me an email that Harper Audio had approved my audio, so thank you to them for that. So I can actually finish my TBR for the month. This one we are following Tasha. She and her husband Aaron need a break. They've been raising twin girls. They have been pretty much focused on raising the kids and have let their relationship kind of fade a little bit in the meantime. So they take a chance to switch with her sister and her husband for a week, and the sister comes to take care of the girls, and Tasha and Aaron go to Venice, to where the sister has a home, and they are going to spend a romantic week there. Things don't go entirely according to plan, though. They have a weird run-in with somebody who is speaking Italian. They don't know who or what this was about, but they kind of shake it off as just walking up the wrong dark street late at night and lessons learned. But then they get awoken by a phone call, and their girls are fine, but her sister and her sister's husband were attacked inside their home in what appears to have been a break-in. The aftermath of this is really difficult. They rush home. They then get a letter addressed to her saying that the wrong sister was the victim. So now she's wondering why she would have been potentially attacked. Is somebody coming back for her and her husband? They're now back in the home, trying to settle back in, trying to help her sister recover. And there are a lot of question marks in this one. I am intrigued. I'm at the 50% mark. There's also a backstory to this family. The sisters once upon a time had a younger sister, and as a baby she was kidnapped and never heard from again. Their mother believes she's still out there somewhere, and that's another question mark that I have. I'm assuming that's going to wind up tying into the story, and it's not just about these women having a little bit of extra paranoia about people and people doing bad things. So I'm definitely interested. It's been very slow burn so far, but I think it's been an easy read. It's been one that I'm enjoying the characters so far. I'm really interested to see if the different elements between what happened to them in Venice and what happened back home, how those things are going to potentially tie together. And I'm assuming from the synopsis, these sisters have secrets or things going on in their lives that are going to come out. So I'll keep going and report back. I have finished off The Wrong Sister, and I like this one. I think it's not maybe a new favorite Claire Douglas, but it still was very entertaining, very gripping. There were twists and turns in the way that the different kind of plot points of the missing sister from the past and the attacks in the present all kind of work together in the end. The secrets that wind up getting revealed about different characters. I think there was some groundwork laid for one of the bigger twists toward the ends that was definitely there, and I remember reading and just didn't think through in the way the author wound up using it. I felt like maybe there was an element that didn't fully get explored, but I may have missed something, or it may just have been there as a red herring and kind of to distract possibly. But in the end, I think this one's getting a solid 3.5 from me, rounding to 4 for sure, because the characters were interesting. I think the motherhood aspects in here were definitely part of the plot, but not to an overwhelming sense where all we were hearing about was the children and the feelings of being a mother. The kind of people who had things to share were surprises, and there was enough groundwork for the side characters and the people involved that I did actually feel something when the reveal came of who knew what and so forth. So I think this was well done. I'm kind of talking myself into a 4 on this, I think. So that's where we're going to leave off with it and move on to my next book. I'm back because I'm at 47% into my final arc for this particular arc attack. And if I ever decide to do 13 books in one vlog, again, someone kicked me, but that's okay because we're on the final book and that makes me feel accomplished. I am reading The Hitchhikers by Chevy Stevens, and this is a gifted copy I have from Macmillan Audio and also an ebook from St. Martin's Press and NetGalley. We are following Alice and Tom, and they are on a road trip in an RV going to the Olympics. This is 1976, so this is quite a ways back in time. And that means that they're in kind of not the most fancy of RVs, but they're making their way across into Canada because they have had a really devastating loss in their life with the loss of a child. There's a lot of trigger warnings in this book around the ideas of loss of pregnancies and the death of a child. So putting that out there to start with, because that will be an issue, I know, for some people. This one is definitely heavy in that regard. The couple are stopping at campgrounds along the way. They're making their way, like I said, and they meet these younger kids. They're 18 to early 20s, and they are camping as well. One of them is in need of Band-Aids, and Alice volunteers that they have some. They invite them in. They let them borrow a tent. They kind of take them under their wing. Alice isn't 100% sure that she wants them with them, but her husband kind of invites them along, lets them hitch a ride to their next stop, and this seems okay to start with. But then they find out that these kids aren't exactly who they say they are, and they find out some really bad things about them. Suddenly, Alice and Tom are in a lot of danger. They are kind of stuck. They are trying to survive. They are trying to find a way out of the situation, and this is where the thriller element comes into play. I've said many times, even in the space of this vlog, I'm not in much of a historical mood, but I will say in this case, the historical nature of the story is really more about just the point in time and not having technology, not having cell phones, not having kind of the modern twist to things, as opposed to it feeling like a truly historical book, if that makes any level of sense. It's not like I'm sitting down to read a World War II historical fiction novel. I wasn't even sure initially what era this was set during, other than the Olympics kind of clued me in a little bit. So it feels relatively modern as I'm reading it. And I am having a good time with it. I think it built up the relationship between these four. It's building up the relationship between Alice and Tom and the loss they've had. I think all of that's done pretty well. It's giving hints about what the younger couple's past looks like and starting to give the reader kind of an idea of why things happened the way they did potentially. But I'm really curious to see what other reveals are coming. We've definitely had some high tension moments. We've had some moments where Alice and Tom were primarily following Alice, actually, is kind of leading the way in terms of trying to find a way out. We're also getting into Jenny's head in the POVs, not so much the guys' POVs as much. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic because initially the young woman was kind of like a almost pseudo daughter in some ways, but obviously in this dynamic things aren't going well. So I am very much intrigued. I got through the first half of this just in the past couple of hours listening to the audiobook, and I am ready very much to turn on my AC, chill out for a while, and see how this book ends. I stayed in bed this morning finishing up The Hitchhikers and figured I would do my final thoughts and wrap this up before I go reward myself with some coffee for finishing all 13 books, or at least vlogging all 13 books. This one lost me a little bit in places. As we got into the second half of the book, there were a few things that felt a little repetitive to me, and we definitely got some slower moments. We wind up in a different setting with more dangers going on, but at the same time, I was ready at that point for the action to kind of be coming to a conclusion, and there was still quite a bit left to go. I do like how this wrapped up. We get some more reveals, some more kind of the reasoning behind what has been happening with the characters who have been killing people, and there's some level of interesting discussion there in terms of, was some of what they did justified, was it not? There were certainly reasons at least for it and why people were pushed to limits. There are more trigger warnings that hit in the second half of the book that certainly would feel spoilery, so go into this one with caution. If you do have areas of concern, I would look those up. But I think the action parts of this were well done. The moments of tension I definitely felt along the way. So I think this one's winding up at a 3.5 or so. I had a good time with it. I'm glad that I read it. Would I say it's a must read? No, not necessarily, unless this is kind of the type of book you're exactly in the mood for. If you want kind of a little bit of a slasher-y vibe, there's definitely some injuries that happen along the way. There's some stakes that come along the way, body horror a little bit maybe. I would say definitely if you're sensitive to people being shot, stabbed, etc., I would steer clear. But in the end, it wasn't a huge win, but it ended things on a fairly positive note. Let me know in the comments below, have you read any of these? Or any of them on your TBR, on your radar to pick up? Or let me know an upcoming release that you're looking forward to. And if you've made it this far and you don't have anything to comment, leave me a thumbs up emoji for hitchhiking. With that, if you could hit the like button below, I would surely appreciate it. And subscribe if you're interested in more of my arc attacks, more of my book reviews in general, and my bookish content. But for now, I'll leave you here and see you real soon in a new video.